You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 28th of November 2024 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up.
Russia has no legitimate reason, none at all, for making Iran and North Korea de facto accomplices in its criminal war in Europe.
Russia deepens its ties with Iran, with Moscow already using weapons supplied by Iran. Where could their relationship move to next? Also coming up in the next 60 minutes, the ICC seeks an arrest warrant for Myanmar's military leader. We'll examine its chances. And the embezzlement trial of Marine Le Pen draws to a close.
C'est totalement faux. Je ferai ce que j'ai à faire dans le cadre de la défense des Français et ce procès qui intervient n'entre aucunement en considération.
The French far-right politician says the charges are false. We'll look at whether a trial is the best boost for a reputation nowadays. We'll also find out why a new airport for Greenland is presenting as many challenges as opportunities, plus the papers and the design news too. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. Thousands of people in Lebanon are continuing to return to their homes after a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah came into force yesterday. The administration of the US President Joe Biden is preparing a weapons package worth $725 million for Ukraine. And the UK government says a deal to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius still requires final agreement from the country's government. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, since the start of Moscow's invasion in 2022 of Ukraine, two natural bedfellows have emerged in the shape of Russia and Iran. Both subject to international sanctions, both pariahs, and both in need of a like-minded friend. Iran has supplied Russia with missiles and drones, and now the likes of Britain's Foreign Secretary is sounding fresh alarms. David Lammy has said the UK is deeply alarmed by the level of Iran's involvement in the war against Ukraine. Well, to tell us more about this partnership, I'm joined now by Renad Mansour, who's Research Fellow in the Middle East and North Africa Programme and Project Director of the Iraq Initiative at Chatham House here in London, and by Jenny Mathers, who's Senior Lecturer in International Politics at Aberystwyth University. Good morning. Welcome back to you both.
Good morning.
So just explain to us, Jenny, in terms of the involvement in the Ukraine war, how deeply involved and engaged are the Iranians?
Well, the Iranians are providing valuable resources largely in the shape of weapons. So ballistic missiles, ammunition, artillery, all these kinds of things they're providing for the Russians, which help the Russians to bolster their supplies. And of course, the Russians are getting through massive quantities of weapons and ammunition in their war in Ukraine. So, Russia really could not fight the war in Ukraine the way that it's been fighting it without allies like Iran, who really provide this very crucial extra sort of support.
And Renad, the willingness of Iran to participate was quite rapid, wasn't it?
Yes, I think Iran strategically it needs this alliance with Russia, needs this relationship with Russia. It sees itself along with Russia as part of this axis that is growing outside of the kind of Western rules-based order. And so, although they share a very long history and they've had ups and downs throughout their history, at this moment, they do have this external sort of enemy that is uniting them.
And Rana, just staying with you, last week there were fresh sanctions imposed by the United Kingdom against Iran. What were they? Why? And to what use? To what purpose did they serve?
Well, Iran has been under quite significant sanctions, particularly since the U.S. President Trump, when he was last president, tore up the Iranian nuclear deal, the JCPOA. since then, there have been the UK, the US, Europeans have tried to basically isolate Iran through economic sanctions on its industries, its energy industry, and other financial industries. And this is where the Russia sort of element, along with other countries, becomes even more important for Iran, because as the US, as the UK wane in sort of their ability to be global powers, there is this alternative economy that's growing and rising, and Russia and China and other countries are part of it, and these offer crucial lifelines for Iran. So the UK, the US are expected to continue with these sanctions. Nonetheless, Iran is finding ways to get around it.
And staying with you, on that point, the fact that how does Iran get around this, given the fact that it's forging new allies, and does it feel as if it actually does have does it feel emboldened by this?
Well, of course, the sanctions do have an initial sort of hit on Iran, particularly on the Iranian people, by the way. But the elites, those in charge, have managed to find these ways to get around it. I mean, in one example, we've seen that in some parts, Iran fuel has actually increased in exports post these sanctions from, following the end of the nuclear deal. So there are markets out there in China, in Asia, in Africa, where Iran is able to trade. And even with Russia, we've seen that they've even started to trade in their own currencies now, moving away from just this dollar trade. So there are a lot of trends in sort of where the sort of global politics is moving, that are offering this environment for countries that are sanctioned to be able to find avenues to export their, in this case, their rich fuel.
Jenny, how much does Russia need Iran?
Oh, definitely needs it a lot. I mean, Russia is highly dependent upon other states, especially Iran, for not only weapons, but also for selling it grain and for, all kinds of other forms of cooperation. Russia also supplies weapons and intelligence to a number of Iranian-backed groups, such as Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and in all of these ways, Russia is able to sort of become more and more of a thorn in the side of the West, to sort of stir things up, make more difficulty for the West. And this is a way of kind of retaliating against the West, short of direct military action.
And just and continuing on that point, Jenny, when we look at the situation that Russia finds itself now with the invasion of Ukraine, it is very recent news that North Korea is sending its own troops directly to the front line in Ukraine to bolster the Russian effort. Do we see a point when Iran might be called upon to do the same thing?
I'm sure the Russians would welcome soldiers from absolutely any source that they could possibly get it from. Whether the Iranians would be willing to do that or not is another question. But certainly Russia has shown that it is very happy to accept foreign fighters from a variety of places. And certainly it would encourage its closest allies in this war to follow the suit of the North Koreans.
Rena, do you believe that Iran would be prepared to send troops directly? I mean, we have seen in the last few weeks reports that Yemeni fighters backed by Iran have been recruited by Russia to fight in Ukraine, but recruiting direct Iranian nationals to fight in the war against Ukraine, would that be a possibility?
Well, at the moment, Iran is going through a strategic review of its defense doctrine, given the sort of the current war it's at with Israel and the losses it has faced. Previously, I think Iran would have favored what it calls forward defense, which is to send, as you say, its allies, these armed groups across the region, the Houthis, the sort of PMF in Iraq, to do a lot of this fighting for it. I mean, the Iranian public don't want to see, their soldiers coming home dead, and sort of all the casualties, that they had, for example, in the Syrian war. And so it's hard to see whether Iran will send right now, given its own issues and its own wars, send its own soldiers to fight in Ukraine. But certainly, I think it will continue with this idea of forward defense when it comes to supporting some of these allies as they go off to fight potentially.
And how much, Renard, are the conflicts in the Middle East meaning that Iran has to keep its priorities in lots of different places? It can't just focus on helping Russia.
Yes, I mean, Iran is also facing an existential crisis. Israel and Iran have, over the last year, in an unprecedented way, fired at each other. You've had very senior Iranian, commanders killed over the last year, along with Iran's allies in Hezbollah, Hamas, and the PMF and others. So this is the challenge for Iran at the moment militarily. It is proving to be somewhat resilient. I mean, Israel has waged this total war on Iran and its allies, but nonetheless, I think Iran is going through this, as I said, this phase of rethinking its defense doctrine. And so this is going to complicate any sort of theater of war outside of this immediate threat.
Jenny, we've talked up until this point of Iran and Russia in step, but there are huge differences between these two countries. They are both competing as bitter rivals in the oil market. And when we look at the way that they approach the United States, Russia has expressed its sort of support for Donald Trump, the incoming US president, whereas the US Defense Department says that Iran tried to kill him.
Yes, there's certainly quite a lot of difference between the two countries. I mean, this is really an alliance of convenience between Russia and Iran, and it's dictated by circumstances. It's dictated by the fact that they're both under heavy sanctions. They need partners for trading. They both, need sort of security partners in various ways. They both want to annoy and undermine the United States and the whole sort of Western-backed liberal order. So they have these kinds of things in common. But if you move away from those, if some of those were to change, then yes, there's no reason really why Russia and Iran might continue any kind of an alliance into the future.
And Renard, is there any way that the West can capitalize on these differences?
Well, there is an argument being made that the U.S. could do this, could divide and conquer in a way. I think it's definitely right that this is an alliance of convenience. In the past, we've seen, for example, in Syria, where the Russians and the Iranians were on the same page to some extent. There were also differences that came out in terms of how they wanted to move forward. And historically, these two countries have been sort of competing in this area. So certainly with the incoming U.S. Trump administration, we know that there will be an effort to end the war in Ukraine. Potentially, even some are saying that to try and work with Russia in a way in the Middle East. I mean, some of these conversations we've been having. If this actually happens, it's hard to say now where the Trump administration will go. But nonetheless, I think there is an effort, there is an awareness that this growing alliance is one of convenience and can therefore be exploited.
Renard Mansour from Chatham House and Jenny Mathers from Aberystwyth University. Thank you both for joining us on Monocle Radio. This is The Globalist. 8:13 in Zurich, 7:13 here in London. Now, the International Criminal Court is to seek an arrest warrant for Myanmar's military leader, Min Aung Hlaing, for crime against humanity. The chief prosecutor of the ICC, Karim Khan, says there are grounds to believe he bears responsibility for the deportation and persecution of the Rohingya. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined by Dr. Ronan Lee, who's an academic and author of Myanmar's Rohingya Genocide, Identity, History and Hate Speech. Welcome to the studio, Ronan. Good to have you with us.
Great to be with you.
Good morning. So just tell us, who is Min Aung Hlaing and why and what is he alleged to have done?
Well, he's the military boss in Myanmar. He's the head of the military. Which
effectively means he's the head of Myanmar.
Well, he's since the coup. He's also the political, claiming political leadership of the country as well. He's the boss of the institution that is most responsible for the genocide against the Rohingya community. In this case, the ICC is seeking a warrant, or the prosecutor is seeking permission from a pre-trial pretrial panel to request to get a warrant for his arrest on the basis of his actions associated with the deportation of around 1 million Rohingya from Myanmar in 2017. So this is the forced deportation that's been described as a textbook case of ethnic cleansing. It's genocidal in nature. Over the course of just a few weeks, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya civilians walked across the border from Myanmar into Bangladesh amid fear for their lives. Their villages were destroyed wholesale as they fled. The Myanmar military unleashed what is a stomach-churning campaign of sexual violence against women and girls. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed, and that is what has led the ICC to take a very keen interest in the Myanmar military and its leadership, which they say is criminally liable for what's occurred, and the case that they want to run is on the basis of crimes against humanity.
This is based on what you said on events that took place as far back as 2017. Why has the ICC got involved now?
Well, the ICC got involved in 2018, and it's taken this long to get to this point. So there's been some issues around jurisdiction. So Myanmar is not a signatory to the Rome Statute. It's not a part of the ICC, but Bangladesh is. And the previous chief prosecutor, Fedra Bensouda, she took the view that the crime of forced deportation was she described it as it's like a bullet fired from a gun in one place, that the crime isn't complete till the bullet hits the victim in the other place. So on the basis that the bullet was fired in Myanmar and the Rohingya were forcibly deported brutally to Bangladesh, that the crime began in Myanmar, ended in Bangladesh, and on the basis of that, she claimed the ICC had jurisdiction. She sought permission to begin a prosecution.
So that's their workaround then?
And that's what has taken this long. They've gathered evidence. They've worked with a UN body, the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, which gathers evidence. It documents witness statements, and has worked closely with the ICC to prepare case files for this case. And it's taken this long to get to the stage where the current ICC chief prosecutor is confident to proceed towards an arrest warrant.
How has this been received in Myanmar?
Well, I suspect it'll be received the way these things have been received to date, that the Myanmar military will simply deny all responsibility. People who want to be critical of the Myanmar military will see it as an opportunity to attack the Myanmar military for its mistreatment of the Rohingya. But really, the problem, I think, for Myanmar long term is that the mistreatment of the Rohingya, as the ICC prosecutors made clear, Min Aung Hlaing, the military body, is not the only one that they're going to seek an arrest warrant for. More are to come. And the problem, I think, that Myanmar has is that there are a lot of people within Myanmar who either stood idly by while the Rohingya were being genocidally deported from the country or supported that process. And some of those are people who support the opposition.
The likes of Amnesty International have come out and said that this announcement by the ICC prosecutor is a decisive step and an important signal both for Myanmar and the rest of the world. But the cycle of impunity in Myanmar has to be broken now. No senior leader has ever been held accountable for the atrocity crimes committed against the Rohingya. And the suggestion is that Myanmar and those in charge will just continue and not be touched by this decision.
I think a very high likelihood that Min Aung Hlaing will the situation in Myanmar is that there's been a coup. There is an opposition group that is the National Unity Government. This is the popular government of the country, not the military. I think the sense is that in the wash-up, as sort of a post-coup future for Myanmar, that Min Aung Hlaing will have to play a role in negotiating that. China has certainly indicated in recent times that it would like Myanmar, the situation in Myanmar, to settle down. Min Aung Hlaing's made a visit to China early in November. I understand that the Chinese authorities would like to see elections within Myanmar or something that is going to settle down the political situation in the country. I don't think elections are going to do it, but China's certainly signalling as the big player in the region that they see Min Aung Hlaing as someone who will play a future in play a role in the future of Myanmar, no matter what a bad role he's played in the Rohingya situation or the mess that he's made of the coup. Min Aung Hlaing also doesn't travel. So he's someone who travels only really to other states that are not signatories to their own statutes. So the likelihood that he would be arrested is, I think, fairly slim. Which
begs the question about, and this is the question that also always comes up when the ICC gets involved into something, is where is the sting in this?
The sting, I think, is a very strong message to the alternative government of Myanmar. They've got to make a decision about what sort of future they want for Myanmar. Do they want a future where they simply negotiate with a war criminal and a genocidal general like Min Aung Hlaing, or do they present to the people of Myanmar a vision about the future of the country that involves a judicial system that you can rely upon the rule of law, that when someone is accused of crimes against humanity and found guilty, that they'll face justice?
And the wider region, I mean, we've seen ASEAN meeting and having major headaches about what to do with Myanmar every single time. They just don't know what to do about it. The Thai authorities don't know what to do about it. Bangladesh obviously having to cope with the influx of Rohingya citizens. How would an ICC arrest warrant, which is, as you say, is yet to be found up, yet to be decided, how would that change the region's attitudes towards Myanmar, or is it just something which is they have a problem neighbour who has enormous internal issues and it's just too difficult to touch?
I think ASEAN will certainly feel that it loses face if it brings Min Aung Hlaing or others that face future warrants to its meetings. So it is something of a wake-up call to ASEAN, that they need to be mindful about how it's going to look for them. And this is something that ASEAN leaders do care about. They care about the optics. They care about how things look. Really, ASEAN's been, hopeless would be I think, been very generous to ASEAN in terms of how it's dealt with the situation in Myanmar. Really, this is something that I think ASEAN has shown itself not to be fit for purpose in terms of dealing with the situation within the country. Myanmar's a mess. There are a third of the country in facing serious economic crisis. In some of the border zones, reports just in the last couple of weeks, the UN agencies suggesting in Rakhine states, is adjacent to Bangladesh, up to 2 million people, would be more than half of the population, facing famine in the starvation in the coming months. I mean, this is a very serious situation. ASEAN's not been helpful in terms of calling the generals to account. The generals just ignore them. That's ultimately what happens. Min Aung Hlaing just ignores ASEAN. It's going to take the big players in the region, so that's China, the US, those that present themselves as important geopolitically, to take a stronger interest in this. And the simple thing that Western governments that have talked very tough on human rights, like the US, they need to stop the Myanmar military from importing aviation fuel. They're using this to maintain their military superiority within the country. This is a country that I think is very close to tipping the Myanmar military out of power. And one of the things that keeps them in is that they control the air. And that's something that foreign governments could change very quickly if they chose to.
Dr. Ronan Lee, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. Still to come on today's programme.
The pictures are absolutely extraordinary, and I was just so impressed when I saw these pictures. It reminded me almost of Mecca or something, these crowds swirling around.
Andrew Tuck will tell us about the new December-January issue of Monocle magazine. This is The Globalist.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
Let's continue now with today's newspapers. Joining me in the studio is Yossi Meckelberg, Senior Consulting Fellow at the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House. A very good morning to you, Yossi.
Good morning.
Looking very smart this morning.
Thank you.
Anything good to do? Anything good on the cards for today?
I have to do when I come and see you, but I have other meetings as well.
Oh, okay. I'll give you that. Right, let's have a look at the papers. Clearly, I think the focus must be, for you at least, is the ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. And the fact is that we are, 28, 29 hours into it. It is still holding. Lebanese citizens are beginning to return home, despite what the Israelis are warning them not to yet. But the focus is on Hezbollah, isn't it? Insofar as there is a sense that Israel has really won this.
It's in a much better position than it was 3 months ago. For a year, it's more than a year now, Hezbollah managed to keep part of the country basically empty, 60,000 people displaced for more than a year. So in this sense, it was seen as a strategic success, almost victory for Hezbollah. Then came the pagers and the attack and the elimination of most of the Hezbollah's leadership, and the table turned in this war. But the big question is what happened in the intervening years. Because we know that in between 2006 and 2023, Hezbollah built its military capabilities, and it managed to keep part of Israel the minute they decided on the 8th of October 2023 empty. Are they going to rebuild their military capability, their leadership, and how much Iran is going to be involved in that?
There's an excellent article in the New York Times that you've brought to our attention today, which sort of explains the various different views of this ceasefire. For starters, it talks about the way that Hezbollah has told the Lebanese that it alone could defend them from Israel. And it has also sort of framed this ceasefire as a victory for Hezbollah simply because it has survived what Israel has done to it in the last few months.
You see, success or failure in war, it depends what the objective you set to yourself. I don't think when most of your leadership has been killed, your capability has been reduced, and regardless whether one agrees with the way Israel conducts wars or not, the gross devastation in the country, it can be regarded as a great success. Hezbollah spokesperson said yesterday, look, our people are already going back to the south of Lebanon. Your people are still not there, but it's more about showing irresponsibility. You see, at the end of the day, and very different for what happens in Gaza and in the West Bank, Hezbollah is using the enmity with Israel to keep its relevance in Lebanese politics and in conversation with their paymasters in Tehran. But as such, there is a very minor border dispute between Israel and Lebanon. There is no reason basically to Israel and Lebanon not to live in peace with one another.
Hezbollah has said that it will only stop fighting once Israel stops attacking Gaza. That's gone away now, hasn't it?
Right. Yeah, that's how the war changed. And eventually, if they link the two, Hamas had an even higher expectation. Hamas at the beginning had an expectation that Hezbollah will get fully involved in a war. And then Hassan Nasrallah said, no, you didn't tell us that you're going to do that. It's your war. We will support you. We will have the supporting act in all of this. And as the last 3 months evolved in the way the war evolved, at the end of the day, Hezbollah decided that they can't keep going like this. There was also pressure from within Lebanon, outside Lebanon, and they delinked between the two, and Hamas probably feel more isolated than ever.
Let's move to an article in the Washington Post, which is talking about ESG, which for so long was the thing, and now there seems to be one almighty backlash against it, as people have just continued as normal. And this is an article in the Washington Post which talks about what's happening in Texas.
Yes, just to kind of the ESG, for environmental search and government. And we have conflicting forces now in the international when it comes to the environment. We are just a few days after COP29. Try to keep temperature to 1.5 degrees, about pre-industrial age. And this needs us to use less fuels. On the other hand, there are all these oil and energy and gas producer. They want to keep pushing oil and energy, and Texas is one of them. So while, and this goes to actually the financial world in the United States, and specifically here in Texas, when the big financial companies decided to actually embrace ESG and not to invest in companies, in oil and gas company in Texas, when money that comes from pension funds. Now Texas decided to, or the authorities in Texas decided to retaliate and tell, no, you can't put your money there. So it's divestment on divestment. And as a result of it, now the thing is, from Texas' point of view, because these pension funds are much smaller than this company, for instance, BlackRock, worth $8.5 trillion. The funds can be in the hundreds of billions. So this makes a kind of a difference in their power there. There is a power imbalance between the two. So it's not going to affect the big financial investment company. However, I think it's the messaging there, which is more political than either economic or environmental.
Let's move to a story in The Independent. The former chief EU negotiator has said that young British people should be able to go and spend some time working, living, studying across the European Union for a little while. This is obviously the EU trying to open doors again. The Labour Party has said no. Sir Keir Starmer has said no, we're not interested.
Yeah, I mean, this is typical Keir Starmer. Let's not make any big decision that can, rock the boat more with the electorate. To be fair, Labour promised before the election no return to freedom of movement, custom unit or single market. But this is very specific, allowing young people, it's under 30, the freedom of movement, to go study, work, get experience. And we have similar agreements, by the way, with countries like Australia and New Zealand, that we are allowed to come here for 2 years and work. And the same for young British people to go and do exactly the same. Why not with the countries that actually own our border, so to speak? And it has more to do with politics than common sense, because in principle, Keir Starmer himself, he was not in favor of leaving. He was against Brexit. So, and we know that Brexit inflicted huge damage on the economy and the relations with Europe, of the UK standing in the world. So there is an opportunity to soften it a little bit and make the life of young people just a bit better, but there's still resistance to this.
And you've done your fair share of academic teaching. How have things changed that the freedom of movement was removed, and those European students who used to come to the UK, have they now gone?
Of course, because it's made a huge difference in terms of the fees that they are paying, and university relies on foreign students because anyway universities have huge hole in their finances. So we need more and more students. It's not only the financial side. Anyone that's been in class knows how enriching it is to have students from around the world. They become the main asset, intellectual asset in class, and if we lose it, our university is not going to be as good as.
Yossi Mekelberg, thank you as ever for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Globalist. The time here in London is 7:33 a.m. Let's have a look at what else we're keeping an eye on today. Thousands of people in Lebanon are continuing to return to their homes after a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah came into force yesterday. Many areas have been devastated. A truce brokered by the US and France has halted more than a year of fighting. The US president says now he will make fresh efforts to bring about a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Meanwhile, the administration of the US President Joe Biden is preparing a weapons package worth $725 million for Ukraine. It's believed the outgoing outgoing president is trying to support Kyiv before he leaves office in January. It marks a steep uptick in Mr. Biden's use of the so-called Presidential Drawdown Authority, which allows the US to draw from current weapons stocks to help allies in an emergency. A spokeswoman for Donald Trump says several people chosen for his incoming administration have received threats, including bomb alerts. Caroline Levitt said the threats include swatting when police receive a hoax call, a summons urgently to someone's house, and affront false pretences. And the UK government says a deal to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to the Mauritius still requires final agreement from the country's government. The newly elected Prime Minister of Mauritius says he needs more time to study the details of the deal, which was agreed by his predecessor. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. It's 8:34 in Paris, which is where we head now, because yesterday saw the final day of the trial of the French far-right leader Marine Le Pen on embezzlement charges. We won't know the verdict until March next year, but as it stands, the process has placed Madame Le Pen and her National Rally party in the headlines, just at the point where she could play a key role in taking down the country's government. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Florence Biedermann, who's a journalist and political analyst based in Paris. A very good morning to you, Florence.
Good morning, Emma.
So if you wouldn't mind, could you just briefly recap what the charges are against Marine Le Pen?
Well, basically, she is accused of having used the funds of the European Parliament to pay not the European parliamentary assistance, but to finance her own party's employee. For example, her bodyguard and dozens of other people. This is what the main charges are. And now the problem is that she risks what is at stake for her is her political future, because if she is found guilty, which honestly seems probable because there are many indications that she was at the center of this system, then it would be also assorted with the fact that she couldn't be eligible for 5 years. And that's the core question in this trial now, whether she can be candidate for the next presidential election in 2027.
So, and this begs sort of like the wider question, the potential barring of Marine Le Pen for running for president. Does it really matter, given the fact that we have a new generation coming through with the National Rally, and she has deliberately stepped to one side, and arguably Jordan Bardella and the fresh generation could offer a sort of a new excited energy?
Yes, she stepped aside, but, she didn't step aside during the campaign for the legislative election, but she didn't step aside as a presidential candidate, because this is her goal. She has been candidate twice already against the incumbent president Emmanuel Macron, and she definitely wants to be candidate a third time. You are right. There is this new generation. There is Jordan Bardella, who was quite successful. But during the last elections also, it appeared that many of the candidates, the smaller candidates of the party, were not ready. Some were found having anti-Semitic or racist declaration. So you feel the party is not completely stabilized yet. And even if Bardella is the new face, the political weight, the experience of being candidate, it's more Le Pen than Bardella.
So tell us a little bit more, though, about the way that this is being viewed in France, because the immediate comparison can be drawn with Donald Trump and his criminal convictions in the United States. And he actually used that as a sort of a scene of martyrdom. Can something comparable be drawn from what's happening to Marine Le Pen?
Well, this is absolutely what she is trying to do. She's a lawyer. She was a lawyer. And she's trying to make this a political trial because, as I said, there are so many indications that she really may be convicted eventually, that her only tactic is to cry out loud, they want my political death, this is a political trial, I did nothing wrong. I wouldn't say martyrdom, but at least she presents herself as a victim. And she says that if she cannot be candidate, then it will be a violation of democracy. But of course, on the other side, there are many people, and including the judges, who refute this kind of logic, because it is a way to criticize the independence of justice. She's asking the judges to kind of give a political judgment on the fact that she has to be candidate, because if not, it's a violation of democracy. That's her main campaigning team, I think.
And all this happens just at the moment when the French Prime Minister Michel Barnier's budget is sort of trying to hold together the fragile coalition government, and Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party is threatening to vote against it, and that could just bring the whole house down, couldn't it? Not just in France, but if the French government collapses again, the repercussions across Europe could be phenomenal.
Yeah, and also in France, if the government doesn't survive, then everybody will ask, so is Macron in a position to continue, being president, because he's appointing government and they don't last more than a few months. So yes, this is a really serious threat. And from the beginning, Front National has been saying, have been threatening to censor the government. They are using it as a way of putting pressure on the government to have them taking measures that are closer to their ideas, which already they do. Also, it's kind of, a bit ambiguous, because if they do this, if they censor the government, that means it will be a complete mess again. And maybe, you can think that for the electorate, they will be viewed as, creating chaos instead of trying to stabilize the country at a very delicate moment. So that's what they will have in mind when they want to decide whether they vote this censorship or not. Plus, if they don't have the votes of the whole left, meaning the far left, LFI and the socialists, then the censorship won't happen. So it's kind of delicate game now, because even if they want to censor the government, maybe they cannot do it.
Florence Biedermann in Paris, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. .40 here in London, 5:40 a.m. in Nuuk. Travelling to Greenland has just become easier. The capital, Nuuk, has a new international airport, but its opening coincides with tricky times. Climate change and over-tourism are serious problems, as is global security. Well, Bruno Kaufmann is a global democracy correspondent for the Swiss Broadcasting Corporation. He's written about this, and he's a regular voice on Monocle Radio. Good morning, Bruno.
Good morning, Emma.
Good to have you with us. Now, before we start looking at the problems, let's just, celebrate this. This is a nice new airport which starts to connect Greenland with the rest of the world in a way never before.
That's right. I mean, this is a game changer for Greenland and for the whole of the Northern Arctic, because until now, in the last 75 years, people had to go through old military airports of the United States built in the Second World War, which are inland, far away from where the people in Greenland lives. And now, for the first time, it will be possible. And it's from today that people can fly into the capital, Nuuk, with this new, fresh airport. And this change, of course, the whole idea of Greenlandic let's say, self-esteem, but also the Greenlandic transportation, which has huge impacts. And there will be direct flights to Europe. From summer, also direct flights to the United States.
And it's amazing. It's brilliant for Air Greenland as well.
That's right. Air Greenland changed. I mean, they put all their people from Kangerlussuaq, the old airport, yesterday into Nuuk, and now they are operating from Nuuk. And that also, of course, changes the transportation within Greenland, because additionally to this new airport in Nuuk, there will be two new airports in Ilulissat in the north and Qaqortoq in the south to be opened within 2 years. So this will also change the possibility to travel from Europe, from the United States into different parts of Greenland within a day.
So this is a brilliant idea on paper, but the fact is that tourism is already at its peak point in the far north. I think there's something like 130,000 visitors coming into Greenland every year, either on a cruise ship or flying in. That's going to grow, and that's going to pose the usual obvious challenges. But also for a country which is terribly small, doesn't have a massive infrastructure, and indeed is very, very delicately balanced in terms of its climate.
That's right. I mean, the country is not small. It's very huge, but there is very little infrastructure and very few people living there. So this changed a lot also for the Greenlanders. They have really to think about how to build up an infrastructure for these incoming visitors. They want to have people who stay there. They prefer, of course, people who are coming there for quality holidays, instead of just sitting on a cruise ship and coming into a few hours on shore. So this is a big challenge. In Ilulissat, the main tourist center in the north, they are building several new hotels. I was just recently also in Nuuk, and they are building there a lot. Even in the south, there are plans for new hotels. So Greenland is preparing for these new opportunities, but it will have to be seen how this will work out in the end.
And tell us a little bit, very briefly, about the fact that the security situation and Russia is an issue that needs to be thought through as well.
That's right. I had a long meeting with the commander-in-chief for the Arctic Commando recently, and he told me that this is really also something which have changed enormously, as they can see Russian boats, Russian flights on the East Coast on a daily basis. So the Arctic Commando, which is still very much financed by Denmark, is now beefing up together in cooperation with Canada and United States to be much more operational, to be much more, let's say, on the spot, to be able to see these threats, but also to continue their major role, which is rescue, which are services to the Greenlandic society. So the security challenge also offers some opportunities for Greenland to really develop this. And this is enormously important now when there will be more people flying directly into Greenland through the new airport in Nuuk.
Bruno Kaufmann, thank you as ever for joining us on Monocle Radio.
UBS is a global financial services firm with over 150 years of heritage. Built on the unique dedication of our people, we bring fresh thinking and perspective to our work. We know that it takes a marriage of intelligence and heart to create lasting value for our clients. It's about having the right ideas, of course, but also about having one of the most accomplished systems and an unrivaled network of global experts. That's why at UBS, we pride ourselves on thinking smarter to make a real difference. Tune in to The Bulletin with UBS every week for the latest insights and opinions from UBS all around the world.
Now to some in-house news. Monocle magazine's annual bumper holiday issue for December-January has thumped onto newsstands today, and it has a brand new segment. It's called The Concierge, guiding you through the Parisian shopping and answering your questions on all things hospitality. Although, as Monocle's editor-in-chief Andrew Tuck explained a little earlier to Chris Chermak, the idea of The Concierge goes back to something quite spontaneous.
Well, the Concierge has a kind of funny history and was almost designed by accident. Well, it was designed by accident, actually. We were having an event, one of our Monocle Quality of Life conferences, and a guest cancelled almost like the day before. Fair enough, these things happen. But it was a travel-related guest, and Ty's like, oh, what should we do? And I don't know why, I just suddenly thought, I said, why don't we do it? Why don't we answer? We know lots of questions about travel and the right answers. So we came up with this idea that we would, at the conference, we would have a bell on a desk, and that people in the audience, they were allowed to come up and pretend it was a concierge table. They had to bang the bell, and then they could ask us anything. And it was so much fun because we managed to pull up other people in the audience to answer questions. We teased people. It was very amusing.
You made it interactive.
Yeah, we made it interactive. And then it became a radio program. Then it became a column, and now people can write into the concierge. But now, in the magazine, it's become a comic strip, a kind of French-style comic strip, which has its own character, and the concierge, as well, has been brought to life in pen and ink. And every month there's going to be a bit of an escapade for the concierge as he tries to solve a few problems. This week, this month rather, his problems aren't so huge. It's about Christmas shopping and finding some gifts.
I mean, that can be
Paris.
A pretty huge problem, frankly, for a lot of people.
Actually, I'm undermining it, aren't I? Because it is a massive problem. It gives me stress every year. But so now the concierge is progressing. So who knows? Maybe the concierge will be a magazine one day. Maybe the concierge will be a TV program. But certainly it's growing in ambition with every passing month.
So there are a number of other things I wanted to ask you about this issue, because there are quite a few new things, new series, different aspects for different parts of the magazine as well. One of them that struck me, which is right in your neighborhood, as it were, is urban enclaves going to Mumbai. Tell me about that one. It's a new series looking at sort of, in this case, Mumbai, but also a series.
And a series that will move around in the issue. So it starts off in the affairs pages, but in fact, the concierge, I think, will be helping us pull that together as well. But the idea is that when you go to many cities, there is just the neighbourhood that works, and it doesn't mean that it's rich or it's always a wealthy enclave. But there's a place where actually all the facilities you need are there. It's got the good school, it's got a nice place to go and buy your bread in the morning, there's a good park, there's an art scene, a city within a city often. So we went to Mumbai, and I think it's a really wonderful story, because you suddenly realise this old territory of the city that would have been a bit of an empire holdout has actually become this kind of cool place to live. It's been co-opted and changed and moved on, but it still has much of the storied architecture and buildings from the past there, and it's a walkable neighbourhood, and it has all these things that I've described. So we're going to do one every month and just look at the people who make an enclave. And I think also when you travel around the world, you end up in these cities and you realise there is the bit of the city where everyone seems to want to be and where they hang out. Sometimes they're a little bit expaty, sometimes they're for locals, sometimes they're just driven by entrepreneurship and local trade. But we're going to find these enclaves and celebrate them.
And just finally, a couple of other things that struck me also in the column that you wrote for the magazine. You were particularly excited about going to the Spanish castels for the first time, and a guide to buying photography, which I found interesting.
Two things I'm quite
completely
interested in.
Different.
Yeah, so I like Spain, and I'm interested. And we tried to do this story a couple of years ago, and it doesn't come off for some reason. But Tarragona has this thing called the Castels, with a celebration of Catalan art culture, where people build human pyramids, essentially, human towers, castles. And you have to stand on each other's shoulders. It's about balance and poise. But it's also about this amazing thing. It's about generosity and helping each other, because you have to have like the sturdy buggers at the bottom of the castle, and then the next people can build up on top of their shoulders, but you have to hold each other and you have to lean in and give support. And then at the top of the castle goes normally a child, a very young child, high up, so you have to make them feel safe as well. But it's about community and it's about coming together. And so the pictures are absolutely extraordinary, and I was just so impressed when I saw these pictures. But also,
it's such an amazing, just even that first picture that you have to open the story. I mean, It just looks incredible, absolutely incredible.
So all the photography by Julia Salmon. It's colourful, and there's something. It reminded me almost of Mecca or something. It's like doing the Hajj or something. These crowds swirling around. So I found it both mesmerising and oddly moving, really, this notion of how people come together. So that was important. And then Sophie Monaghan-Coons, who's been doing our culture pages recently, I asked her to work on this idea of a guide to buying photography. And wow, did she go for it? She found great collectors, galleries. But she also dived into a topic which always fascinates me about is why some pictures sell for very high prices at auction and why other pieces actually by the same photographer go for much less. And it tends to do with were the pictures printed during the photographer's lifetime? Did he sign them or she sign them? Is it a rare print? What was the editions? So she goes into all of that, but she also goes to see this amazing exhibition at Phillips. And there's a portrait in here of Sarah Kruger, who's the head of photographs in New York at Phillips. And it's just one of those portraits. It looks posed, but it's not. She's just like an amazing character. And again, when you see these auctioneers at play, they're amazing people, and you just in that moment you understand why people are probably putting up their paddles and giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars to this woman, because she's just such a mesmerising again character to see on upstage.
Interesting to do almost meta photography of the auction, of photography of the auctioneers.
Monocle's editor-in-chief there, Andrew Tuck, talking to our senior news editor Chris Chermak. And remember that the new December-January issue of Monocle magazine is out in all good newsstands now. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Finally, a few minutes left to talk design with the writer, editor and consultant Samantha C, who joins us from Paris. Good morning, Samantha. How's Paris this morning?
Good morning. Paris is grey but beautiful.
Excellent. That's a perfect description. Tell us what's big in it. Tell us what's big in the world of design.
Well, there's a lot going on. You know, it's been a very busy time. What's really interesting is that there was a new Jean-Paul Gaultier couture collection that went up for auction. It's the private collection of Lebanese businesswoman Muna Ayoub. And she had, you know, a really stellar collection. And this was an auction that was co-collaborated between Maurice Auctions in Paris and Carrie Taylor Auctions in London. And what was stunning was this beautiful denim and, you know, ostrich gown from the designer's 1999 couture collection, fetched for a record price. It exceeded its estimate of 25 to 35,000 euros and sold for 377,000 euros.
Incredible. And it highlights the fact that fashion now and art and design are now an interchangeable part of culture, aren't they?
They are. You know, what was interesting as well was that 12 of these pieces will now join, you know, international museum collections. I think, you know, often when people think about auctions and art auctions, they don't necessarily think about fashion. But in the last 5 to 10 years, definitely since the Alexander McQueen exhibition and with the rise of, you know, the visibility of the Met Gala, I think fashion has really become a big talking point for institutions in terms of collection and preservation.
Let's move on to another subject that's been happening in Hong Kong.
Yes. So in Hong Kong, the iconic Pedder Building, which is the only pre-World War II building left on that street, the Joyce Wang studio has created Club Petard, a new wine bar that it stretches, you know, 3 floors of the iconic building. It's about 2,500 square feet. And it's just got this gorgeous wine cellar that runs through the entire 3 floors of the building with over 10,000 bottles of wine.
Wonderful. And just explain to us, you know, where the idea is all coming from and what's inspiring it.
Absolutely. So this is an exclusive members club. And the name Petard actually is a reference to a short French bread. It's actually really cool. And there are 3 distinctive restaurants. There's Le Clos, Petard, and Opsé, which each, you know, shows a different kind of culinary direction that they're going in. What's really great is that this grade 1 listed building, it actually has this like giant cellar that runs 3 floors, and guests are invited to come in and tour the cellar and pick out their wine before going for food.
And the interesting part of this one is, as you say, this is a heritage building. This is a beautiful building, and it has had to be designed very sensitively.
Yes, it has been. I mean, this is the last remaining of its, you know, of the pre-war buildings, and it has housed different museums, different retail shops in the past, but because it is so iconic, there are a lot of things that had to be, you know, preserved, I guess, in a way, so that the integrity of the building stays. It wasn't like a complete rehaul. It wasn't like, you know, they tore everything from the inside out. So that's what I really loved about this, was that it still kept the integrity of the history of the building, but it definitely incorporated a lot of design elements, such as the see-through cellar that I was talking about, that I think is great. They've also been able to incorporate the bread iconography throughout its design process. So it is a very special space.
Samantha C, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers, Anita Riotta, Chris Chermak and Carlotta Rebello. Our researchers were Sana Jumani, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield, with editing assistance by Steph Chungu. After the headlines, more music is on the way. I'll be back with a briefing live at midday here in London. I hope you can join me for that if you can. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.